Pensioners could soon face a tax bill on their state pension for the first time, as forecasts show it will come within pennies of the personal allowance threshold. By April 2026, the full new state pension is projected to reach £240.90 per week, making the annual amount just 15p below the tax-free threshold of £12,570. The following year, in 2027/28, the pension is forecast to exceed this threshold by £315.50, creating what experts are calling a bizarre tax cliff edge for retirees. The figures show a steady progression towards this tax threshold over the coming years. In the current 2024-25 tax year, the full new state pension stands at £221.20 weekly, totalling around £11,541 annually, still £1,028 below the personal allowance. By 2025-26, this gap narrows significantly to £553 as the pension rises to £230 per week. The critical point comes in 2026-27, when the annual pension reaches £12,569.85, just 15p shy of the £12,570 threshold. John Greer, head of retirement policy at Quilter, commented on the situation, saying, "What was intended as a mechanism to protect pensioners from poverty is now colliding with fiscal drag. This situation is the result of the triple lock producing some significant increases in the state pension due to high inflation and earning figures, while the government has failed to uprate tax thresholds in tandem." He noted that the UK is potentially only 1 year away from pensioners having to effectively hand a portion of their state pension back to the exchequer in tax, which to many would seem perverse. Greer suggests potential reforms to the triple lock could include linking increases to earnings with temporary CPI indexation when inflation exceeds wage growth. This approach would help align pension growth with the wider economy and create a more predictable and affordable system. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has committed to keeping allowances frozen until 2028, but could address this issue in the autumn statement. Any changes would need careful consideration, as the state pension represents the single largest area of welfare spending and a vital source of income for millions. If the government doesn't adjust the personal allowance before 2027-28, millions of pensioners could face income tax on their state pension for the first time. This would create an unusual situation where a benefit designed to provide basic retirement income becomes partially taxable. The forecasts highlight the growing tension between the triple lock protection for pensions and frozen tax thresholds. Without intervention, this could represent a stealth tax on retirees who rely solely on their state pension, potentially undermining the purpose of recent pension increases. This comes as British workers have been warned to brace for a triple whammy of financial pressure, despite Chancellor Rachel Reeves' claims that there would be no new taxes in her spring statement. While no headline tax rises were announced, experts say hidden costs buried in previous budget measures could leave many households worse off in real terms over the coming years. Robert Salter, director at tax and advisory firm Blick Rothenberg, warned that Reeves' claim that households will be £500 better off doesn't reflect the full picture. He told GBNews, "While Reeves has announced no new taxes in today's spring statement, it is clear from her comments and the report from the Independent Office of Budget Responsibility, also known as the OBR, that there will be a number of financial changes and challenges for ordinary working people over the coming years. The rise in employer national insurance contributions to 15% from April 2025 is just one part of a triple whammy that will hit taxpayers, alongside higher than forecast inflation and downward pressure on wages. In economic terms, this is a tax on people's net incomes, even if it isn't labelled that way." Salter also highlighted the impact of rising business costs on employment. He said, "As it becomes more expensive for British companies to hire and retain staff, we're likely to see a knock-on effect on pay growth and job security. The government's NIC rise doesn't just affect employers, it filters down to workers in the form of suppressed wages and fewer opportunities." Beyond wage pressures, households are facing significant increases in council tax and utility bills. Average water bills are expected to rise by around 26% in April, while council tax is set to increase by 5% or more in many areas. The tax expert explained that the government has failed to provide sufficient funding to local authorities to offset these hikes, in part due to increased NIC burdens on councils themselves. Salter said, "While the Chancellor may not have introduced new taxes this week, she hasn't addressed the existing pressures. Rising council tax, inflated utility bills, and static wage growth all hit ordinary working families hard. These are real costs, and for many, they are unavoidable. So, while the government claims people will be £500 a year better off by 2029, critics argue that rising costs and stealth taxes could easily wipe out those gains, and then some. Journalist and broadcaster Carol Malone took aim at Labour's economic policy and Rachel Reeves' spring statement on GB News.
You just don't sound well at all. You just sound a little bit mad and a bit deluded. And, you know, to say something like you're fixing the foundations of the economy, the economy's flatline. It's in the toilet. We've got stagnant growth. Living standards are plummeting. And she's trying to make out like we're living in this country that's booming and it's all going well. And I'm thinking,
deluded. What
planet? I mean, your paper had that word on the front page today. But it was interesting that Dan Hodges actually said he called that her statement yesterday. He said it was her resignation speech in all but name. He said if ever she wants to know when her political career ended, it was at 1:06 yesterday when she sat down having delivered this statement, because she's talking to us like we're stupid, like we're idiots, like we don't understand what is actually going on, and we do. And I just think, you know, how long are we going to have to bear with it? And this follows, of course, hot on the heels of the second freeloading scandal this week that we've seen. The woman, and she also, do you know, when I was watching it reminded me of past chancellors, you know, people like Nigel Lawson, people like Roy Jenkins, giants of men, clever men, informed men who delivered statements in a calm, rational manner. She was hectoring the other side.
She was unbelievable.
Yeah, when she was, and I just thought, you have no respect.
Just not statesmanlike.
No respect for your office, no respect for your position. And I just think, you know, Diana Hodges could be right.
She did that for a deliberate reason, because she knew behind her there was no applause, no baying, no roars, no hears. So the only time there was any affirmation from her backbenchers when she made cheap partisan points.
She made that cheap dig at Kemi Badenoch saying, isn't it time for you to go and have your steak, didn't she? Because she said in an interview that she likes steak for lunch.
Blame everyone else.
Jonathan, go on, defend it.
It's a really difficult position to be in, that I don't think I can provide the necessary balance this morning, because I don't think that this was a statement that a Labour Chancellor should have been making. I don't think it was a statement that a Labour Chancellor could be proud of making. This is incredibly disappointing. I might disagree with it for different reasons from you, but fundamentally, it doesn't matter who is in government. It is always wrong to balance the books on the backs of the poorest and most vulnerable. And particularly when balancing those books is really just squaring up a fiscal rule that you've invented yourself. There is absolutely there is no, obviously, I know that, look, I understand that chancellors need to have rules to sort of placate the markets and to retain investor confidence. I get that. That's not a partisan issue. But these rules, this is the sine qua non Rachel Reeves' sort of tenure. This is saying this is the one thing that she will not budge on, and that to me seems mad. You have to be able to change. If you're saying that the world has changed, then you have to change as well. That doesn't mean that the poorest people in society have to cop it. It means
let me try and defend her,
because you know, for example, if you're borrowing, if there's an emergency, COVID, the rules go out the window. You borrow, you borrow, you borrow.
There wasn't an emergency.
I can also defend her, Bev, because what I can say is that she's right that the world has changed. She's absolutely right about that. And with US tariffs coming down the line, we are going to be exposed. We're going to be very exposed. These car tariffs are coming in on the 2nd of April.
Cut on net zero. Cut on net
she
zero
was handed
ambitions.
the fastest growing economy in the G7, and she's trashed it. So there's no defence of that. All she had to do was nurture that, take care of it.
She hasn't trashed it.
She has trashed it. The growth forecast has halved.
Well, Trump wasn't in power then.